The conversion story of Walter Wood Rice. Walter Wood Rice was my grandfather. He was born and raised on a farm near Amherst, Nebraska. He was the oldest, with a brother and then twins as the youngest, a girl and a boy. After he completed the 8th grade, he went on to attend a 6-week short course at the Nebraska Agriculture College in Lincoln, Nebraska. In the winter of 1909 to 1910, he attended York College at York, Nebraska, taking commercial work. When he finished that, he then took up a teacher's preparatory course, obtaining a teacher's certificate by the end of the summer school in 1911. This is his own story in his own words taken from his life story. On the way home from York, I stopped off at Shelton, Nebraska and hired a livery rig and drove to District 22 west of Shelton and made application to the school board, a Mr. Isaac Buck, an H.J. Dugdale, and George W. Barrett, for the position of teacher for the following term. With the promise of the position, I prepared to return to town and take the next train home, but not until I had accepted the invitation to enjoy a good farm dinner at the Dugdale home. It was there that I met the members of the Dugdale family, including the oldest daughter, Lulu, who was also a school teacher. During the school year, I boarded with the Dugdales and was made to feel as one of the family. Lulu afterwards became my wife and companion and the mother of 2 of the finest daughters the Lord has ever blessed a home with. The following spring, on June 8, 1913, Lulu and I were married at the Dugdale home amidst an arch of roses. I took the civil service examination and went to work as a letter carrier in the post office at Kearney, Nebraska. I was married and living in Kearney when my wife and I joined the Congregational Church. The reason, I guess, was because the minister was very friendly and a likable person. However, a few months later, he got a chance to go to a larger city at a better salary. Our interest in church faded as the new pastor was not a good speaker and the members lost interest. James Dugdale, Lulu's father, had Mormon background, with his grandparents joining the church around 1848 in England and coming to the United States to make their way to Utah. His grandmother, Sarah Janes Matthew, was widowed in St. Louis, and James's father married her in 1855 before they made the journey on west. However, in fording a stream near Grand Island, Nebraska, then called Germantown, they broke a wheel on their wagon and had to drop out of the wagon train to get the wagon repaired, and then wait for the next wagon train to come along. While waiting for the next wagon train, the husband became interested in the level plains country in that area and decided to stay and settle there. 2 of Sarah Jane's children by her former marriage went on to Salt Lake with the next wagon train. Many years later, when Lulu's parents were married and had their family, 2 young Mormon missionaries, well-dressed and wearing derby hats, stopped at the farmhouse in central Nebraska and had a meal with the family and taught them about the restoration of the gospel through Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. However, Mormonism and polygamy were so closely associated in the minds of the family that little progress was made. At the end of the meal, the visitors thanked the family for the meal, and one of them said, "And the Lord will bless you also," and they went on their way down the road, briefcase in hand. Years later, Tom and Estella Burt, a young family from Salt Lake, went back to central Nebraska on a vacation trip to visit their first cousin, Jim Dugdale. They were both versed in the gospel and explained its teachings to all who would listen. This young couple had something good. They had a reason for life with a logical reason behind it. They could tell us where we came from, why we were here in this life, and where we were going after this life was over. They had a way of life that meant joy and happiness to those who accepted and followed it, a way of life that would provide a passport back into the presence of our Heavenly Father and exaltation in His kingdom. To me, as a young man who listened years before to the missionaries explain the gospel while eating dinner at his parents' farm home, there was something of great interest in this good Salt Lake couple and their belief. There was something satisfying and desirable, something different from the religious teachings of any other church he'd ever known. My wife and I were very much interested in this newly found religion. During the next year, we studied all the tracts and books that we could get on Mormonism. When the following spring came, we felt that we had found the right church and were ready to apply for baptism. We waited for the missionaries to return to our area. However, Lulu began to suffer with tonsil troubles. The trouble began in March, and in May her condition became such that we took her to the hospital in Kearney for an operation. Dr. C.K. Gibbons removed her tonsils, but her system did not seem able to throw off the poison that the tonsils had caused. At sundown on May 22, 1922, she passed on to her last call, and her spirit went on to fulfill a greater mission. Her memory still lives to those who knew her and to the two fine young ladies, her daughters. 2 months after my wife's death, on July 6, 1921, I was baptized into the church. The following summer, I was made an elder. I then took my 2 little girls and went to Salt Lake City, Utah. My trip out to Utah was very exciting for young Lillian and Margaret. We went in my Model T Ford, and it took 5 long days over very poor roads to get there from Nebraska. My sister Ida went along with us to help take care of the girls. I went through the temple for my own endowments, and with the help of the good couple who brought the gospel to us, I was sealed to my wife and my 2 daughters. The motivating force for Walter was the strong desire to have the necessary ordinances performed so that the family could be sealed in the temple for time and eternity. When the sealing was done, it culminated the dream Walter and Lulu had when they accepted the gospel, a dream that was only temporarily delayed by the death of Lulu. Walter went on to become a faithful member of the church for the rest of his life. He said, "I have worked in the most of the organizations of the church, as a Sunday school teacher, Sunday school superintendent, and the same in the MIA organization. I was a branch president of the Council Bluffs, Iowa branch before coming to Utah to live. Since then I have been made a high priest and have been secretary for the last 15 years. I've also been a ward teacher and worked in genealogy." I was only 9 when my grandpa Rice died. I have fond memories of him as a gentle, loving grandfather. I remember he once owned a Dairy Queen in St. George, and when we visited he would let me come and make my own ice cream cones and taught me how to make milkshakes. I thought that was a wonderful thing, to be able to have as much ice cream as I wanted. He lived nearby in the St. George Temple and Brigham Young's winter home in St. George. He would tell stories about his ancestors and did a lot of genealogical research, and then the temple worked for them. He stayed faithful in the gospel until the very end of his life. He was also a mail carrier for many years. During the 1950s, mushroom clouds often rose toward the sky from the Nevada test site for nuclear bombs. Winds routinely carried radioactive fallout to communities in Utah, Nevada, and northern Arizona. He died of stomach cancer and always wondered if he was a casualty of the high cancer rates in the area because of those tests. A few years back, as I was doing some genealogy work and I noticed the dates of when he had his work done, I felt like this is a real love story. I know he must have been a grief-stricken young father and husband, and to see that he went through the baptism to the church and to be faithful and get the priesthood the next year and go on to the temple, to me that is just an eternal love story. And I cried when I first realized how wonderful this was and what love he must have had for his wife.